Kenshi, a game of many mechanics and experimentation. The game delves into the kind of territory usual game design that would not work, yet the game itself plays as an interesting blend of game mechanics that define and create its unique gameplay and genre. This is Kenshi. Mechanically, what makes Kenshi Kenshi? The game in itself is a blend of many mechanics. According to the game's official wiki, it's a single-player sandbox PC game in the vast atmospheric swordpunk open world with a mix of RPG elements, squad-based controls, and city-building features. These are just genre mashes, but how does the game really play out? For a game these lofty genres, it puts the game in an interesting place for experimentation. So how does the game play? The game as it plays out for me is both an upside and a downside of the mechanics of the game. The game has no tutorial of what is explained through brief wiki pages. Most of your learning through the game would be done through trial and error, YouTube Let's Plays, Steam community guides, and wiki page searching. This kind of in-game knowledge of games has disconnected that makes it feel like homework. However, trial and error can push the game in a learning lens of through the experience. Other games have done this and have worked fine. Games like Don't Starve and how new events and items mix up the game. Minecraft, when the game first came out, needed knowledge to build the right tools to do specific tasks. But each of these games are one of their own. Each Minecraft and Don't Starve have their own looks about what creates a distinct style. But how does Kenshi fare? Kenshi itself presents a game style that's sufficient to be practically playable, but looks very much bland in initial playing. The game mechanically has this issue of being a sandbox that requires time and dedication. The issue being that much of the interesting leaps and points of interest spaced through the areas are large time gaps. Nothing wrong with this, but the game is specifically made to be unforgiving and cruel. It's the kind of game that rewards the greatest part of the game during the mid to late game down the track. There is one issue though. The initial grind is too high and unforgiving. It pushes out the casual audience. Nothing wrong with this, but due to the knowledge gap required to play it, its interesting points of gameplay are difficult. What the game lacks in progression level difficulty makes up a mechanical gameplay that is unseen. The game itself is a combination of an RTS, RPG, survival kind of game, but is not not in a straightforward sense. In the game, it's considered that each of the characters until you're down to the last person are all disposable. The issue of this is that it makes the attachment of these characters very limited unless you use your imagination. The game becomes a focus of efficiency, production, growth, and expanding, rather than a game of exploration which the game was originally intended. The game phenomenon Kenshi is that you can play in two areas of the map who can complete their own actual travel autonomously and individually like an RPG carry gear. In my years of gaming, I have not seen such an implemented idea in this fashion, which makes the game Kenshi a phenomenon of mechanics. The issue that separates an atypical RPG, even the squad mechanics of other games, is a scale of individualization. The RTS that are popular focus on the economy and composition of the team, on the focus of combat that focuses on one goal. Typically, squad-based games focus on a character or squad but cannot go past a certain point. Kenshi moves in a fashion such to be similar to the scope of Mountain Blade, where large armies with all individualized items move and attack. The problem is getting to this point in the game though. The problem comes to many sandbox games is that the issue of focus and direction and the kind of length of gameplay such that game plays out. With the game, it has such a good late game mechanics that suffer from early game boredom and grind. The thing with the game is it narrows down the kind of power you have over fights and an economy. Sure, the game has different playstyles at the start to change up the initial starting phase of the game. The game could even go as far to try with mods with such endeavors requires thought, which again becomes the idea of research. The game is not for beginners or casuals with limited time. It's simply on a gameplay loop scale that's too long to endure for a typical gamer. The game mechanically is the kind of game which large leaps in progression repetition of gameplay requires those willing to suffer through long hours and gaps just waiting. Mechanically, the game in itself makes it simplistic of a character's unit composition ever evolving and change. The combat itself leads to allow for a focus on scarcity of resources, an issue of expensive equipment making everything earned. Eventually, the eventual outcome to create a powerhouse faction to eventually rival cities and reach the exploration of the game with lore of the wiki only briefly explains what makes both a mystery of the mystery of the exploration but the game of forever thriving potential. The game is unforgiving, that's for sure, but the game allows for grinding and careful gameplay in safety and combat situations required through or the risk of issue of starting again. I commend the game for trying something not usually seen in games, which is to try something new, gameplay loops that typical gamers will fail, and the sheer scope of the kind of gameplay. One considers that if only I had more time, I would sink my time into the game to truly experience the kind of depth that provides in the terms of management and economy. One considers that if one had more time, they'll sink more time into the game to truly experience the kind of depth that provides in terms of management and the economy. The issue is that with the more time that rewards novelty and quick gameplay, gives one too many options to really experience something shorter. If I was to suggest something, I would say watch the gameplay of YouTubers, feel the progression and how people go about the game. Mechanically, it's something new. Fun-wise, it's something in terms of the long haul. Long game-wise, it's rewards and ever-changing game in terms of scope. In a way.